Chapter 19. She always does that when the preacher gets up. I don't know. It's a good thing I don't get a complex real quickly, so yeah. All right, Proverbs chapter 19, and let's go down to verse 12. And we covered verses 9 through 11 right there, last couple of services. So chapter 19, verse 12. The king's wrath is as a roaring of a lion, but his favor is as dew upon the grass. A foolish son is the calamity of his father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dropping. House and riches are the inheritance of fathers, and a prudent wife is from the Lord. Slothfulness casteth into a deep sleep, and an idle soul shall suffer hunger. He that keepeth the commandment keepeth his own soul, but he that despiseth his ways shall die. He that hath pity upon the poor lendeth unto the Lord, and that which he hath given will he pay him again. Chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul spare for his crying. A man of great wrath shall suffer punishment, for if thou deliver him, yet thou must do it again. Hear counsel, and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end. There are many devices in a man's heart, nevertheless the counsel of the Lord that shall stand. The desire of a man is his kindness, and a poor man is better than a liar. The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil. A slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. And reprove one that hath understanding, and he will understand knowledge. He that wasteth his father, and chaseth away his mother, is a son that causeth shame, and bringeth reproach. Cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causeth to err from the words of knowledge. An ungodly witness scorneth judgment, and the mouth of the wicked devoureth iniquity. Judgments are prepared for scorners, and stripes for the back of fools. Wow, it's always so much in there. And even as what's always interesting to me is even when I'm standing up here with a set of notes of what verses to look at, my mind catches the attention, or it's called by a certain attention of certain phrases and words, and it's like, I hadn't seen that before, even as I'm reading it. That's what's amazing with the book. And that's what's amazing with Proverbs. And if I had to go verse by verse, you would never get out of Proverbs. Okay, so I have to skip over all sorts of things. I have to. Benjamin Franklin, most of you know who that is, I hope so, right? You know of him. He was an older man by the time the Revolutionary War took place, and obviously he wasn't able to fight, but he was very influential, of course, in our country and our nation. He had many little sayings with the Farmer's Almanac and just the inventions that he came up with. And yet, of all of those things, there was qualities about that man, looking back in history, that were not very pleasant. There were personality quirks that he was the oddball of the day. There was one discussion one time where John Adams and Benjamin Franklin both had traveled over to France. I believe Franklin was already there. When they get there, they're sharing the same room, like in a hotel, right? Their same room's going to sleep in the same bed. Not uncommon at the period of time. And so the argument lasts until wee hours of the morning. Benjamin Franklin says the windows must be opened up because the cool air will help our health. The period of time, everybody's consensus was you close the windows at nighttime, even though it got stuffy, because it was the night air that had not germs, because they didn't have the idea of that yet, but the idea that sickness would carry in from the outside, and that's what would make you sick. And so John Adams said, no, the window has to be closed. And so they argued till wee hours in the morning. This is recorded in a letter by John Adams to his wife. He said, finally, at wee hours in the morning, I gave up, and we left the window open. And so you just see this personality of this guy, that is amazing. We're come right back to Proverbs 19, but look at Luke chapter 16. There's a reason I bring up something to you about him, but let me give you a verse to go along with it. And again, there's a lot of things that we look towards Benjamin Franklin, historical figure, and admire because of character and qualities of the man. Again, there's other areas we wouldn't look towards. Luke 16. And Luke chapter 16, verse 1, and he said unto his disciples, there was a certain rich man, which had a steward, a servant, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him and said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship. for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? So he's thinking that, right? He's like, what am I going to tell him? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. To beg, I am ashamed. I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors unto him, and said unto the first, how much owest thou unto my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said unto him, take thy bill, and sit down quickly, and write 50. Then said he to another, and how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, take thy bill, and write 80. And the Lord commended the unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. Did you catch that right? He tells you the story, and then all of a sudden he inserts into verse 8, and he goes, and oh, by the way, let me give you this in the interpretation. Lost people got more sense sometimes than saved people. That's what he's just told them. Now that's absurd. You're the child of God. You're redeemed, headed to heaven. You've got an eternal book that we preach based off its verses, that it can take wisdom from on high and place it in your mind. It could change your will. It could direct all of your life. Do we not say that the Bible has the answers to all areas of life? That's what we believe. And yet sometimes as believers, we're the most ignorant folks when it comes to just practicality of this world. We're ignorant with things. He says, for the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. Miss Janine comes in at night. She hands me her phone. She says, can you fix it? I said, if I can't, we'll find somebody younger. Do you think he's talking about technology? I don't think he's talking about technology. Sometimes there's a book in the office in there. It talks about the lives of millionaires. And it just traces and says, how do these guys become millionaires? What is their common factor? And one of the things that's just common about individuals that are wealthy is they've learned how to give. And if they give, there's just a principle that you end up getting something back in return. Now, obviously, they're using it for their advantage, but they know that when they give, something comes back. Well, where do they get that from? Not necessarily from the Bible, but it's a natural law of sowing and reaping. And yet, you and I both know that there are Christians that are stingy and have never even gotten that principle from the very book that you and I have read from. Go back with me to Proverbs 19. And the reason I mentioned to you Benjamin Franklin, in all of his problems, yet he had some great wisdom. He had a list. And with his list, he said, these are the things that I need to work on and I need to accomplish in life. I'm going to go through the list. There's 13 things on his list. He said, number one, he said, I need to have temperance. Now, temperance is self-control. One time, Benjamin Franklin said, he who cannot obey cannot command. That's a Bible principle. He said, if you can't take orders, then you'll never be able to give orders. Temperance is learning how to control self and telling yourself no. He said, the second thing I've got to work on is silence. These were his guidelines in his life. He said, number one, temperance. Number two, silence. Learning to be quiet so that I can listen and learn. Number three, he said, order. Being orderly. Keeping things in order. All of us have had situations where your items that you're working on are in disarray. And it's frustrating. And you can't find it. When the boys were little, and I'll count it as being little. I won't tell them that they do it when they're still big. But when they were little, they liked to take things apart. And looked out there one day, and it was a weed eater that hadn't been used in a long time. And they're like, we're going to take the weed eater apart, and we're going to rebuild it. They took it apart. That's as far as they got. Yeah. And they're like, we're going to work on it. And there's tools everywhere. And then there's a screw here. And then there's a part way back in the backyard. And the other day we were doing the wood flooring in the house, and I'm like, okay, I have 2 rubber mallets. I cannot find either one of them. I have no idea where they're at. Has anybody in this household used these rubber mallets? No. I don't know why I asked. It grew legs and disappeared. Jeremiah was out there doing some mowing, and found a rubber mallet. Yeah. Now, it was still intact. He had found it and brought it. He says, here's the rubber mallet. And I'm like, yeah. So someone had used, we know who it was. We don't say, but we know. And then when things are in disarray and disorderly, it affects us all. Temperance, silence, and order was number 3. He said, number 4, he said, in my life, he said, I need resolve. I need to be resolved of what is important. Number 5 is being frugal. That's the same guy that says a penny saved is a penny earned. Being frugal. There's verses in Proverbs that talks about that a man that's slothful is a waster. He wastes things. Some of you need to learn to enjoy leftovers. Just saying. Number 6, industry. He said on his list, industry. Meaning, don't lose out on time that you have, he said. You don't get that back. Make it productive. Do something with what you have. Number 7, he said sincerity. He said, I've got to be sincere. Number 8, he said justice. Doing that which is right, just. Number 9, moderation. We all like a piece of cake or cookies or just the little enjoyments of life, but there's moderation. There's moderation. Number 10, cleanliness, he said. Being clean. Physical. That was actually one of the things that George Washington said. He had a little book in the office as well. He put out a list of all the soldiers in the Continental Army. He said, these are your rules of being men. And in there, he told them to be clean. Clean yourself. And so the same man here, Benjamin Franklin, says, I need to be clean. Number 11, tranquility. There's some times that you and I both need to just turn everything off and let it be quiet. Every once in a while, I'll say something in a service or an invitation and not say anything. And it makes people nervous. It really does. Because our society is used to being busy, 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 sounds going all the time. And sometimes we just need it quiet. And you say, well, it makes me nervous. You'll get over it. God might speak. You might just kind of calm down a little bit. He said tranquility was number 11. Number 12, he said, is chastity. A moral purity. No, he didn't do too well with that one. Benjamin Franklin was kind of known as the Bill Clinton of his day. Yeah. John Adams would write back to Abigail and see him over in France when he went over there, and he was just appalled at the behavior of Benjamin Franklin. And then 13 is humility. That's a pretty good list. It almost would sound like it's a good Bible list. And you realize I could temperance, silence, order, resolve, frugal, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, and humility. And you realize how much of our American Christian culture today is lacking probably 80% of those? Much less, we don't even talk about it. We just look at Christianity and say, it's your body, you do whatever you want to. Nobody should rule you or tell you what to do. And Christ said, he said, the children of this world have more wisdom than the children of light. It's almost like that what Solomon is doing in Proverbs is he's doing that very thing. He's saying, you need a list. Son, you need a list. And he's just, if you'll notice, he'll almost repeat certain things. Have you noticed that? He might speak about children. He might speak about the slothful man. And he words it just a little bit different the next time. And it's not the same, it's not a repetitive. There's a couple places in Proverbs where it's a repeat, but rare. Most of the time, it's worded differently. Look at chapter 19 again, chapter 19, and look at verse 14. He said, house and riches are the inheritance of fathers. So it's what they pass on. He says, and a prudent wife is from the Lord. He's making this analogy, and obviously you could say that here the father in this life is able to produce a physical piece of property and the riches as that which is the children to inherit. And then he switches to the wife and he goes, but you know what God can give? He can give relationships. He said, a prudent wife is from the Lord. Now, I'm not going to necessarily talking about the latter half of the verse, the first part, but I thought of this, if I'm talking about a list. Well, that meant Benjamin Franklin said, here's what I want to accomplish. Here's some goals that I have. In verse 14, he said, house and riches. Well, then evidently some guy had a plan. That just didn't happen just by chance. Look at Luke chapter 14. Gospel of Luke again, chapter 14. This time, Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. And chapter 14, look at verse 27. Luke 14, 27. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Those are strong statements, right? You look back at verse 26, 27 of Luke chapter 14. You understand that Jesus did not give the disciples those statements at the first day that they began to follow him. There was a period of growth, and he gets to this place and he goes, now, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to be willing to give some things up. And you got to bear the cross and come after me, or you can't be my disciple. Look at verse 28. For which of you, intending to build a tower, great intentions, see? Intentions. Sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it. Now, I've seen those places in Peoria County where they started something and never finished it for whatever reason. Maybe someone passed away. Maybe they ran out of money. Whatever it was. But they started it. But the idea there in verse 28 is you better have a plan. You better have a plan. If you don't have a plan, it's not going to happen. It's just, you say, well, I did a plan one time and it didn't happen. And your point is what? At least you had a plan. But it's not going to happen if you didn't have a plan. Because you don't know what to expect. You don't know. You got to look at it and go, okay, what is the cost? What is the idea with all of this? Now that's, in verse 28, is tagged onto the subject of that which is spiritual. Notice that. Notice that verse 26 and 27 is a spiritual following, correct? And then he goes, let me give you an analogy. The guy's going to build a tower, but he doesn't count his cost first. He doesn't have a plan. How's it going to happen? David is a beautiful illustration of it. He's told no when it comes to the temple. He puts a plan, and then Solomon comes on the scene and enacts the plan, doesn't he? And builds the temple. And David had it all prepared. If a guy is going to leave his house and his riches, his inheritance, he better have a plan. You know what? If you're going to leave a house and some riches, and don't at this moment, don't go, well, I don't have anything. You got something. You've got something. If you died today, somebody's going to say, what do we do with this item? Who do they want it to go to? We have this amazing little document that comes from the Bible. It's a concept. It's called a will and a testament. And every grown adult in this room should have a will and testament. You say, well, I don't need one. Well, you got a life insurance policy? Some of you do. Then do you want your crazy aunt to go, I'll take the kids. And she'll take the kids in a heartbeat because why? She knows you got money behind your name. But you didn't have a plan. What's the plan? The plan says here's where it goes and here's what is to happen to it. And that will and testament is a changing document. Right? I mean, because I might have had younger kids where it would go. Now when they get older, it might even say, I don't want that one to have it, but I want this one to have it. So it's a plan. That sounds cruel, but I'm just talking. These are the realities of things. So if a guy is going to have a house and riches to pass to the next generation, what is his plan? What is your plan? Okay, now what about this? What about your spiritual plan? That's tagged on to spiritual. Are you going to follow Christ? Oh yeah, preacher, I'm going to follow Christ. Then what is it that holds you back? What is it that holds you back from truly following and giving to God what He's asking for you to give? Is it something physical? Is it the temporal of this life that says, I just can't do it. I'm willing to do it, but I can't because of this. Well, then take care of that. What's your plan? You say, well, it's nothing physical. I've got everything in line. It's all ready to go. Okay, then is it knowing the Bible? Then that means that you need to read and study. Does it mean that you need to be closer to the Lord? Then increase your prayer life. I don't know what it is for you, but there is a plan to get there. That's the context. Look at verse 27. And whosoever doth not bear his cross. What is your cross to bear? Your cross is probably different than mine. And it's probably different than the one sitting beside you. What is the cross that you are to bear? What is it that God has looked at you and said, are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to forsake these things? I'm careful what I say here, but in a recent instance, seeing Christians that have followed the god of mammon, of money. And it brings no joy, and it brings no happiness, and they're miserable. You can get caught up and get entangled in the affairs of this life, Paul said. So what is your plan to get out of it? Listen, I believe fully that God is the God that can rescue us. But I also see that the God of that book looked at Israel in the first battle when they crossed over Jordan River, and he said, you're going to come to the city of Jericho. He said, you're going to march around that city and blow a bunch of trumpets. And he said, I, God, am going to knock all the walls down. Did he do that? He sure did. And you know what he did for you the day you got saved? He knocked some walls down that have never bothered you. One day in your life, not one moment have you even considered picking up the cigarette or the alcohol or the cursing or whatever it was. It hasn't bothered you at all since you got saved. And you had complete victory over it. And the next battle they got to was the battle of Ai. And now God expected for them to do a little work. And you know what God did? You said, God, why can't I get victory over this area like I had on the last one? Stop a minute. You didn't do the last one. He did. Now he looks at you and says, are you willing to put in some time and some skin in the game? You say, what do I got to do? Why don't you read your book? Why don't you pray? Why don't you memorize a verse or two to help you have victory when the temptation comes? And if you've been saved long enough, you understand what I mean by that. There's some struggles that it just takes some devoting yourself to the Lord to say, here's how it's going. Okay, then what about that other thing that God wants you to do? What is the plan? How are you going to get there? What's holding you back? I think there's a physical and there's a spiritual that goes with this. And that's why he tagged the two together. And again, what's sad is that we meander through life like a bunch of lost Jews in the wilderness. And yet there's an unsaved man. George Whitefield preached to Benjamin Franklin the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ about the death, the burial, and the resurrection, and believe upon him by faith. And to our knowledge, he never did. And yet he has a list that ought to be a list that any Christian ought to pick up and say, that's a great list to have. And yet you and I are the ones with the book. Look at Titus chapter 1. Titus chapter 1. Some of you are going to be happy when I get out of Proverbs. Yeah. Uh-huh. You're like, can we go to Ezekiel next or something? You know? Titus chapter 1. Titus 1. Titus chapter 1, look at verse 5. Titus 1:5. For this cause left I thee in Crete, that thou shouldest set in order the things that are wanting, and ordain elders. That's preachers. That's pastors. Then he starts in verse 6, 7, 8, and 9, and gives a list to preachers. Well, he goes on, listen to the passage. You go to chapter 2. In chapter 2, verse 2, there's the aged men. See that? Look at verse 3 of chapter 2. There's the aged women. Look at verse 4 of chapter 2. There's the young women. Look at verse 6. There's young men. Look at verse 9. There's servants. He just gives lists, doesn't he? You know that's what God did. He gives lists. I don't think there's anything wrong. I think it'd probably be a good practice for you starting tomorrow morning to make out a list of what you need to accomplish for the day. You say, I've never done that before. You can do it electronically. You can do it physically. I will say this, if you write it down physically, you have a greater possibility to remember it than you do digitally. So, I'm bad memory, so I write it down physically, and I put it in digitally. Make a list. You say, well, what if I don't get it all done? It won't be the first time. You'll be all right. Then you've already got something for the next day. Now you only have to create half the list. See? Where do you want to be in 5 years? You say, I want to be sitting on a beach with my feet in the sand. Okay, how are you going to get there? If that's what you want. You want to go to the mountains? You want to... I'm not talking about... I'm just giving you something... But spiritually, You want to know your Bible more? How are you going to get there? How do you get there? You better have a plan. You better have a plan. Hey, teenage young man, you want a spouse? You want a wife one day? What do you want her to be like? I think she should know how to read. Okay, start. Yeah, start. Yeah. 2 eyes, 2 ears. Do you want her to be in church? You want her to know how to love God? Or she's just good with selfies? Selfie. Self. Young lady, you want him to know how to work? All I'm saying is make a list of what, say, God, this is what I want in a spouse. Some of those lists, you write it down and don't ever show anybody else. It's a great thing to do. What do you want for the next generation? Benjamin Franklin says, here's what I want in my life. Okay. You're all so happy with me tonight. Proverbs 19. Because what I told the guys, they asked what the title is for tonight. It says thoughts on Proverbs 19. So I got to move along. Here we go. All right. Chapter 19. I think we beat that dead horse. All right. All right. Chapter 19. And look at verse 18. Chasten thy son while there is hope. Chasten. That's discipline. Right? It's a correction. Is there a point where there's no more discipline, there's no more correction, and there's no more hope? He said, chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul of the parent spare for his crying. Buddy, they can turn it on, all right, and just make you feel like, oh, that poor thing. And they're well, watch this. Look at Proverbs 11. Proverbs 11. Chapter 11, verse 1. We have a society that heard the subject of discipline or spanking, and they went, oh no, and it means it's all bad. Now that book is our authority, and we should never shy away from what it teaches, but obviously the lost world looked at a bad example, abuse. Abuse and discipline or correction are not the same. They're not even the same page. Chapter 11, verse 1, a false balance is abomination to the Lord, and a just weight is his delight. In any area of your life, in any area, God expects some balance. He expects things to be balanced with truth and knowledge and mercy and all the subject matters of who he is. And he intends the same thing when it comes to rearing our children and discipline and correction. Look at Hebrews 12. Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews 12. You know, our children have sinful natures. I know that probably surprised you. Yeah. I heard somebody go, hey, guess what? You've got the same sinful nature. My boys have sinful nature. Me and Miss Jamie have a sinful nature. This is what makes the whole thing kind of complicated. Because I'm not perfect as far as got it all mastered, and yet I am to correct them? Yeah. Look at this, Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews 12, and beginning in verse 5. He's speaking about God, but he actually quotes in the book of Proverbs in chapter 12 and verse 5. He quotes from Proverbs chapter 3. And he says there, have you forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children? My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. And what he does is he says, now, hey, you child of God, he says, just like it was in Proverbs, Solomon writing to his son says, you better chasten your child, right? You better, in a home manner, in a family situation. He said, but the same thing goes with God. Is that God will chasten us, and that's what he's getting ready to deal with. Most of you know this, that God chastens us. He deals with us as we are his children, and we are. And that's what he does. Look at verse 6. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Now, I'm not getting into all of this, but I want you to skip down in the passage and look at verse 9. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh. So the writer of Hebrews says that we have all had a daddy, physically, which corrected us. That's most people. There's always an exception to the rule that the individual says, My mom and dad never spanked me, and they never disciplined me. And we all go, yeah, we know it too. Yeah. As a child coming up, it wasn't your fault. In other words, they chose not to do it that way. And it does cause a repercussion because that's the book is right. He says, we all had fathers that corrected us. Now, whether it was with a spanking rod, a belt, or just a verbal correction of you're wrong for doing that, they corrected us. Look at verse 9. And we gave them reverence. And somebody at this moment thought, yeah, because he would have killed me. So there was a generation years ago that if you didn't, it got real close. You obeyed them. You did what they told you to do. You listened, and you dare not call your parent by their first name. Like you just didn't do that, right? I know there's a generation gone by. Not that it should be the same case. It should be respect and honor. But it says here, he said, and we gave them reverence. Look at verse 9. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? Should we not as a believer then submit ourselves to God as the Father of all spiritual beings so that we can live and live right for Him? The answer is yes. Look at Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians 6. Galatians and Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. We're quick to say this to our kids. Children, obey your parents and Lord, for this is right. See, tell them, yeah. And I guess we ought to be sure to tell them, verse 2, honor the father and mother. Why? Because there's a promise that's tagged along with that. I've often wondered if some of them folks, I saw somebody the other day posted a picture, and they had met today it's posted a picture that they had met a Sunday school teacher from years ago, and the lady had just turned 100. You know, it's always funny, like they go to the nursing home and they'll find somebody's 120 or, 116, whatever it is. And poor thing, they can hardly talk, and they don't even know it's their birthday. And they stick the microphone up and they go, congratulations, you're 106 today. What did you do to live so long? And they're like, and I wonder if they're living long not because they ate bacon and eggs, and never took a supplement the day of their life. And you say exercise, and they said, what's that? But I wonder if or the one says, oh, I exercised and I did all this, and God in heaven's going, you just honored your mom and daddy, and I increased your days. That's His promise, isn't it? But watch what He says in verse 4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Provoke is this. It's as kids where the one takes the finger and pokes them. And the other one goes, stop it! That's provoking. See? He says, Father, he said, provoke not your children to wrath. Don't provoke them to anger, but bring them up, not down. There's a little word there. You ever seen that word up? Train up a child in the way he should go. Remember that? He didn't say train down. He said train up. Train up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So we're actually to increase in teaching and training to learn how and why. And do it. Why? Because remember, the same sinful nature that they have, I've got. I've got the same thing. So really what I'm doing as a parent, and what you're doing as a parent, whether you have a plan or not, is you are shaping the will and the direction of a soul. That's what you're doing. You realize the power that you have within your fingertips as a parent? And I can't stop short with that. I mean, this application goes into grandparents. It goes into the elders within the church. It goes to the elder women. It goes to the older men. And I know that we have this broad situation here where some say I have no children, some have no grandchildren, some have all sorts of situations, or you don't get to see them, or you're limited. But your limitation, Hannah had a child that maybe by the age of 2, maybe 3, and then she sends Samuel off to become under the tutorage of Eli, one of the worst fathers in the Bible, with the worst sons. The guy was lazy. He is the only priest ever mentioned in the Bible that sat down on a seat inside the tabernacle. You understand, there's no seats ever described except one seat, the mercy seat. And he wasn't sitting there. He just was a lazy, slothful man. And God took that young man, a young boy by the name of Samuel, and put him under the guidance of that lazy man. And yet he turned out great. Why? I just wonder what Hannah taught him in the formative years. The world figured it out. I believe Hitler said something along the line of, "Give me your kids, I'll change the nation." And that's what he did. Go back to Proverbs 19. Now, some of you at this moment thinking, well, wish we'd have stuck on the last section. Proverbs 19, look at verse 18 again. "Chasten thy son while there is hope." So discipline and abuse are not the same. You know what abuse produces? It produces fear and insecurity. That's what abuse produces. But discipline or correction or admonition, whichever those terms, I know they're different, okay, I'm just kind of lumping those together because those are Bible terminologies. Those produce a security. It produces confidence within the child, especially as they get older. And if they get saved, it's in Christ Jesus. Jeremiah, the prophet, was called of God from the womb. Jeremiah chapter 1, around verse 7 or 8. By the time you get to verse 10, God looks at him and says, all right, he says, now here's your job. You're going to tear down and you're going to pluck up. And he gives him 4 negatives. He said, you're going to change the nation. He's going to give you 4 negatives. And the last part, there's only 2 positives. It's really interesting because we always think there should be a positive and negative. There's 4 and there's 2 positives. 4 negatives, 2 positive. He said, you're going to build up and you're going to plant. You know, in anything in life, there's the worst is, you know, when it comes to painting, is having to tape everything off, cover everything up. The cleanup takes longer than the painting did sometimes, right? But how many of you have done a project like that and you just slacked off on the negative side and then found out that you were having to scrape paint off the floor or clean grout that was hardened off the tile? Have you ever walked into a job where somebody did a job and didn't clean the grout off of the tile when they laid it? And that is a disaster of a project. Some of you don't understand. We'll help you out one day. Yeah. He says 4 parts negative, 2 parts positive. So what am I saying with that? Don't crush them, build them up. That's our job. Don't crush them down to nothing. As our children, build them up. Look at 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13. The amazing analogy that the Apostle Paul gives in regards to our spiritual life. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. In the Jewish culture, by the time the boy turns 13, there's a bar mitzvah. Ever heard that before? Okay. All sorts of cultures all across this world have like an initiation into manhood. You ever notice that? Like they have some kind of ceremony. They have the knight that is being knighted, right? He started off as a page. He became a knight. He was a child, and then all of a sudden he became, now at the bar mitzvah, he's recognized as a man. Go ahead and explain to me, in American culture today, in 2026, what is it that is a transition that he has now become a man? We have no ceremonies. We have no initiation of rites. Our whole generation today is now a generation where grown adults are doing the same gaming and video activities as the little ones. There's no difference. We've come to a place where we have a man cave. What happened to family? Now, you can take any room in your house and turn it a man cave. I do not care, okay? It's your house. I'm just saying that we've created, and if we're not careful, we're sucked into that same culture, and the mentality is there's no distinguishing lines. It's all blurred. You know, God describes it as a young man, and an older woman, and a younger woman, correct? A child, a baby. There's distinguishing. And we have nothing in our culture that now he becomes, at a certain age, he's a man. We don't have it. Look at this, 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spake as a child. Can you imagine? Let's see who got to pick on here. I'll pick on Brother Jimmy. Okay. Imagine Miss Celeste coming in. He goes, he learned a new word this week. Yeah. And she gets him like, all right, now repeat, say daddy. And he goes, dad. We'd all be like, what in the world? And then it's fellowship time. And she says, okay. And we're like, oh, watch Brother Jimmy. She's going to feed him. And she goes, open mouth. Oh. And that's how and we're not talking invalid. We're talking just a grown man. He's fine. His arms work. He's okay. I'm like, not injured. We would all look at that and go, that's silly. What is she doing, right? And I'm just using a simple illustration. But yet we'll look at that baby. And we'll do the same thing. There's nobody in this church that was upset when that baby tonight, in the beginning of service, made a cry. You better not look at that and say, how dare them bring that baby in this church and disrupt by making a noise. That's what babies do, right? Now, I'm all for creating and developing that, okay, let's try to stay quiet, let's try to sit. Okay, that's a great thing because some kids never got that and adults are still all over the place. Yeah. So it's good training, but if the training took place at 60, I'm being nice, 60, we'd say, if she said, all right, we got to go to the changing room. What? Right? It's no longer cute. Okay. When we look at the childish things, we don't look at that and say, oh, that's awful. It's childish, and that's okay. I love nothing better than picking on Drake when he comes in and cutting up with him and asking if I can. He has a nice little bow tie. Maybe we could switch with it, and I'll wear his jacket, and he can wear mine. And they're always like, because it's just childish. There's nothing rude with that. Paul says, he said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. Look at verse 11. He said, I understood as a child. Isn't that what kids do? You could probably convince them that at nighttime the grass tastes like lime Skittles. And they'd probably believe you. He said, I thought as a child. You know what they think? Legos, dolls, house. Right? See, I love the boy thing. It's Legos, it's been war and battles and you name it, we had it all. I didn't grow up with that. If you will play house with us, we'll play army with you. They were liars. They lied. They didn't. You know, if I went to Jamie and I said, let's go home and play house, I would hope she'd say, are you okay? Right? It's no longer cute. He said, I thought as a child. Man, and even as they grow, begin to age, right? If you've had kids, you'll notice that it gets serious, and all of a sudden it'll revert back to something childish. And we're all like, whoa. Just somebody the other day said, yeah, I thought I was going to put all the toys away. I'm like, no, hold on. It's going to pull right back out for about a 30-minute span, and it'll go right back in again. You know. And it's these transitions that takes place. Watch verse 11. But when I became a man, when he became a man, he said, when I became a man, I put away childish things. So I've told the boys when they turn 13, now more is expected of you. And now that you have become this certain age, now it's going to become a place where and some of the toys have to be put up sometimes. It's time to begin to take responsibilities. Our culture doesn't breed that, doesn't encourage it. You know what we have to learn to teach these kids, and I'm not talking about just boys, I'm talking about girls, is there's foolishness, there's childishness. And you might have done some things like that as a child, but when you get into the area that becomes now an adult, it's now foolish. See? I got 5 minutes. Let's go to Proverbs 13. Proverbs 13. I'll finish this out. As a parent, sometimes you have to discern, were they being foolish? Were they creating a problem because they were doing wrong? or they're just being childish. I've had grown adults that act childish, just acted silly. Proverbs 13, verse 24. He that spareth his rod hateth his son. That's a strong term, isn't it? But he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. That word betimes is Old English. It's a really hard word to understand. It's really difficult. It means quickly. You see the word be, B-E. You see the word times. It's a conglomerate of the two words, which means by the time. By the time I get home, that room better... See, well, you used it, betimes. The words, I will be there quickly, and you better get it done quickly. Right? Betimes. We just didn't say betimes. We just said, by the time I get home, it better be done. It's an adverb, is what it is. You know what it is? What he's saying here is, he said, when there's a problem, don't wait. Take care of it. Now, some of you thought, oh, that means right then. Well, wait. It could. But it also means when they're young. You say, well, when do I start? Well, don't start when they're 12. One preacher was asked, he said, when do we start training children? He said, it starts in the womb. Because you know what it is? Remember, they've got the same sinful nature that I've got. And so these conversations are great even with saying, okay, what are we going to do when we have kids, right? How am I going to do it? What am I going to do differently? What direction am I going to go with it? Talk about those things. Number 2, keep balance. We already looked at that, Proverbs 11. All areas of life. So there's a rod for discipline and there's reproof. He said the rod and reproof give correction. The rod and reproof. So the rod is the physical and reproof is verbal. Sometimes all you have to do is just say something. Sometimes saying is not enough. Well, do you use your words with intention? Do you use your words to help guide? One of the greatest things, look at Proverbs 29. We'll close with this here in just a moment, Proverbs 29. And this is chapter 29, verse 15. The rod and reproof give wisdom. See there? 2 areas. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left himself bringeth his mother to shame. Just like God does in his book, he'll use questions. You ever notice that? Adam, where art thou? Right? Questions are a powerful thing. A powerful thing even to direct our children, to grandchildren, individuals. You know what questions do? Questions will open doors. No, not necessarily physical doors. Spiritual doors. One man in Acts chapter 16 asked the Apostle Paul, he said, what must I do to be saved? Question mark. Now that's like a wide open door, okay? You better figure out what to tell him. Questions open doors. Questions connect people. Questions help bring conversation. What did you do today? Right? Larry King said, that was the, and I'm not endorsing Larry King, obviously, of all this, what he did, but he said the key to get conversation started is questions. And that's what he was known for. He was known for a whole TV show that just, he asked questions and let them talk. And what did it do? It brought conversation. Questions show perspective. Why are you doing that? Will that work? What's the outcome if you light that with a lighter? Right? If you hit that, what happens? Stop, please think about this first. You know what it does? It brings perspective. In Job 38, God says, hey, Job, he said, where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the world? You know what that does? That changes your perspective that God is in control. When he comes down out of heaven and says, where were you when I made you? Where were you when I allowed that problem to take place? Right? It changes your perspective. And lastly, questions challenge your direction. God says to you, will you trust me with your life? Man, that's a powerful question. And so when it comes to raising children and rearing children, it's a complicated situation. It really is. But you better get in that book and find proverbial wisdom to guide you and direct you. And it's not just when they were 4 and 5, because somehow it gets a little bit more difficult when they hit their teen years. And maybe the rod is not going to be as effective. Now I've got to say, okay, what question am I going to ask? There was 2 more. I'll just say this. Stay consistent. That's hard. And number 4, keep mercy and keep grace. Because your Heavenly Father said He is full of grace and He is full of mercy. There's a balance with all this. Oh, parent, no school, no church, no pastor, no daycare, no school counselor, no Christian counselor will be able to fully correct what you did in the home. It can't happen. As much as we'd like to think somebody else can fix it down the road, not going to happen. Man, the weight is on our shoulders. And some of you are like, please, dear Heavenly Father, help him to get through Proverbs very, very quickly. Whew. Read Proverbs. Read Proverbs. All right, let's close in a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for the time tonight. Thank you for your word, and thank you for the proverbial thoughts of wisdom that Solomon, by inspiration, gave, that challenges us on all sorts of areas of our lives, of daily things. And so, Lord, I pray that tonight, the things that we discussed and we looked at will be a help to these folks and to those that watched online as well. And so we thank you for it in Christ's name. Amen.